Well, good afternoon and welcome to the principal's office. I am Principal Edward Gordon. I am so glad you have tuned in for this weekly broadcast where we will be interviewing educational stakeholders who have made a significant impact for themselves, for others, and with others in education. In the book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, written by Dr. John C. Maxwell, he talks about the law of modeling. The law of modeling states it's hard to improve when you have no one but yourself to follow. A good mentor is a worthy example, available, has proven experience, possesses wisdom, provides friendship, provides support, and makes a difference in people's lives. We believe there are many outstanding leaders in this world, and weekly we want to highlight those leaders that will help us provide models of excellence for others. Today, our special guest is Mr. Kerrie Martin. Good afternoon, Kerrie.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well. I would like to get started with a brief introduction of our guest today. Kerrie Martin is a teacher, trainer, and coach with a passion for personal development and growth. Kerrie has spent most of his career dedicated to the process of learning as an educator in a wide variety of educational institutions and organizations, including high schools, colleges, and one of the top universities in the world. Through the use of coaching and training techniques, Kerrie empowers those he works with by partnering with them to equip them with the insight and approaches to fully utilize their own abilities and resources so they can excel. In his years dedicated to helping people reach peak performance and maximize productivity, Kerrie has seen the strategies he teaches can help all people to achieve their best in their given field, not just students. Kerrie studied human psychology at the University of Aston in Birmingham, England, and completed his master's degree in human services counseling, life coaching at Liberty University in the United States. In his educational endeavors, Kerrie has demonstrated a passion for understanding human behavior so he can better serve others. His fundamental belief as a believer of Jesus Christ is that all people were created on purpose for a purpose, and so Kerrie now devotes his time to using his education, his experience, and God's word to help people fulfill their purpose with excellence through his business, Achieve on Purpose. Kerrie has been married to his wife Fiona for 14 years and is a father to a son and daughter. While he values the titles of teacher, trainer, learning strategist, and coach, he most values being called a believer, a husband, and a father. Again, welcome to the show, Mr. Kerrie Martin.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm excited for this conversation. So let's start off with author Toni Morrison states, if there is a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, you must be the one to write it. Kerrie, please share with the audience what is your story?
So, my story, I'm the oldest of three kids to my mom, who came from Jamaica and lives in the UK. And I was born there, born in London, England, lived there till I was 5. And then from there, moved to Birmingham, which is where I spent most of my life. So, after pursuing different paths in terms of education, I decided to go into psychology for my undergraduate degree. And it was just really based on just a real desire just to really understand people. I knew that whatever I was going to do was going to be related to working closely with individuals, working closely with helping individuals to achieve their best, to achieve excellence in whatever they do. So after I did my psychology degree, I wasn't really sure exactly what path I wanted to pursue, but I knew that I had a gift for training and teaching, and that's where I went to next. So I went into my postgrad studies looking at secondary education, and I went on to become a teacher in a high school. And in that high school, I taught religious education, psychology, sociology, health and social care, and a few other things like citizenship and civics. But ultimately, it was the psychology and the sociology that I really connected with, mainly because of my degree. And then I went on to become a head of department in those areas. So I led the psychology department for I think it's about 6 years in total, and sociology for a couple of years as well. And I really enjoyed what I did. I really loved the opportunity to continue to extend my own understanding of the subject, but more importantly, I just love working with the young people, just seeing so much potential. And in the UK, the age at which you would study some of the social sciences would typically be around age 16 to 18. So it was right at that age where they're getting ready to think about their careers and university and choices. And those were the conversations that I valued most. 2012, we decided to make the move from the UK to come to live in Canada. So I now live just outside of Toronto, in Ontario, and we've been here almost 9 years now. The thing with that move, though, was that different markets have different demands. And while there is definitely a need for teachers in the UK, there really wasn't as much of a need for teachers in Canada. So there were more teachers that were trained than there were actual spots. So coming here, I had this expectation. I've got 7, 8 years experience. I've got leadership experience. We're going to find work. We're going to get settled, buy a home, things like that. Yeah, none of that happened. And it was a really quick reality check for me. And I think particularly because I realized that once we came here and there were no teaching jobs, that my resume was very much restricted to just in the classroom experience. And that was really a challenging time because it meant that I really had to pivot in terms of what can I offer beyond just teaching in a classroom. And slowly but surely, I did different things. At one point, I worked at Apple doing some training there. And then I went into a local college and just was working part-time and just doing some academic coaching. But as I went through, I began to develop my portfolio. So working with students who were in transition, working with individuals who hadn't completed their high school diploma or their GED, and they wanted to go into post-secondary. Transitioned from there into other colleges and worked in the area of first-year experience, orientation, and then into my current role at a university here, which is where I'm working as a learning strategist. So in learning strategy, we're focusing on study skills, academic coaching as well, but really being specific with the study strategies that students use. So I do a lot of workshops, I do a lot of one-on-ones. But the greatest thing about what I do is that I get a chance to do a bit of teaching, to do a bit of mentoring, to do a bit of program development. So really, it's a combination of a number of different areas. So right now, in terms of what I'm doing, I'm still working within that field, but I'm expanding my portfolio now. I'm really focusing more on my business achieve on purpose, which is where I'm not only focusing on some of those academic areas, but also applying some of the principles to everybody, to adults who are also thinking about how do I become more productive? How do I become more resilient? How do I utilize goal setting to achieve my goals? So that's kind of where I'm at right now, just a collaboration of lots of different experiences.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with the audience. And what I've heard is about your ability to pivot, to be flexible, to make some adjustments, to be a lifelong learner and continue to grow. During this time of COVID-19, this pandemic, how have you had to pivot in terms of your teaching and instruction at this period of time within your school setting?
It's interesting. I've always been aware of the fact that we are slowly moving more into a virtual learning space. And it's always been my desire to be able to teach more online. And even before COVID, I had created a course which I'd placed on Udemy, which was focused on examination techniques and test-taking strategies. And I already had an introduction into that space, but I think what COVID has done is it's really immersed me further into that area where, a year ago, I mean, who was going around saying Zoom? But it's like such a common part of our vocabulary now. So I think it's not just about learning how to use the applications like Zoom and Blackboard Collaborate and Moodle and areas like that, but it's how to use it effectively. It's how you can still engage students. It's how you can still make them feel as though they're connected to the learning experience without it coming across as just being a passive delivery. So I think that's been a real challenge, but it's also been a real area of growth. And I think the opportunity to collaborate with other people, take notes on what they're using, how they're using breakout rooms, for example, how they're using polls and different applications within stuff like Zoom and Blackboard Collaborate, how they're using it to still make the learning experience feel authentic rather than just a passive transmission from a teacher to a student.
Well, thank you very much for sharing those ideas with the audience. There are many teachers, as you know, across this country and all over the world making adjustments. And you're sharing some of those strategies and also some areas that they can look towards in terms of learning and improving their skill set is going to be helpful. So thank you very much for sharing. I have a question for you is what gets you excited every day?
I think a sense of purpose. I think that's the one thing that wakes me up. I am naturally an early riser. There'll be some mornings when it's more difficult than others, but I think just that sense of purpose, that I'm doing something that is impactful. And I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier on when I was talking about teaching in high school. And it's interesting now that, being on social media and seeing so many of my former students who have now got married and had babies. And so when I share stories, I'm sure some of them will actually identify. But the moments that I valued most were not even so much the moments where we were in a textbook or I was at the board. Certainly not when I was marking papers. But the moments that I valued the most were literally the moments at the end of class, where the students would just hang around and they would be talking about stuff and we just get into a discussion about life. We talk about opportunities, we talk about barriers, we talk about, what is their future? What do they see for themselves? And I think when you have those conversations and you can impart something of yourself that is human, when you go beyond just being a teacher, but you go to transmitting something about yourself as an individual who has experienced life, and you get their attention. And then the most special moment I find is that aha moment. And you can see it on the face, you can see it in the reaction, that moment where something just switches for them. I live for that. And when I have those interactions, whether it's a one-on-one with a student, whether it's working with a coaching client, whether it's working in a group, just seeing those aha moments, you feel as though I've done something that will live beyond this moment. And I think that really is my sense of desire for my life, is that I was saying to my kids the other day, I want my life to be able to echo, that when my time has gone, whatever I have done continues to resonate for time afterwards. And it doesn't have to be the big, profound, philosophical things of life, but it could just be a moment that you have with a student, a moment you have in an interaction that just makes that difference.
Yes, very good. And one thing that you just mentioned that I was really thinking about, many times in school settings, you can have a 50-minute period. And yes, administrators, everybody wants everyone to teach from when the bell begins to until the bell ends. But what if you had that structure and classroom management that you did it for 45 minutes? And the last 5 minutes allowed that conversation to happen. And for the teacher to be able to share their experiences, do some mentoring and coaching, and allow for the students within the classroom to express themselves. I just can imagine the fruitful and the productive relationships that will come out of those 5-minute segments, and relationships that will last a lifetime by those exchange of information from the student to the teacher and vice versa. So that was something very that resonated with me and very interesting, and it's something that we all should be considering in education when we're developing relationships with our students.
I think just to touch on that, I think it was Albert Einstein that basically said that his role is not to teach his students through just communicating at them. His role as a teacher was to create the conditions within which the students can learn. And that's one of the things I learned, particularly in the latter part of my high school teaching career, is that me being at the front and talking isn't necessarily evidence of good teaching. Really, what I should be doing is I should be creating opportunities, activities, engagement where the students get to experiment. If you think about, if you got like young kids, for example, a child who is 2, 3, And when they're learning things, they're not learning it when they're listening to you. They're learning when they've got their hands in stuff. And sometimes they're learning stuff you don't want them to learn. But it's just that idea of the world is their sandbox. They just, it's their laboratory where they get to experiment. And I think what happens sometimes, maybe because the curriculum and the nature of the content changes as we get further into the school system, it's almost as though sometimes as educators, we become a little bit afraid to just let them loose. Whereas that is really where they have the most meaningful experiences. So going back to what you were saying, I always say to the university students that we work with, it's ironic that in university at the highest level of education, we actually teach them with one of the least effective methods, the lecture method, where we just have students in a room with sometimes thousands of other students, and they just sit there and they watch you. And you hope they're watching you. Some of them may be even sleeping. But they're sitting there for 2 to 3 hours doing nothing. Whereas in reality, what we should be doing is taking it in small chunks. You know, give them some information, let them rummage with it, let them play with it, let them question it, use critical thinking, come back together. That, and you'll find as well in doing that, those classes go by so much faster than the ones where we're just talking, and we end up feeling exhausted at the end of the day.
Yes, that's great advice, and I hope that many educators are listening to this and making that adjustment in the best interest of the students at all levels. So thank you very much for sharing. What is the most recent book you have read, and how is that book impacting your actions?
Sometimes I get into the habit of reading multiple books at the same time because maybe I'm working on multiple things. The last one that I say that I read in entirety in just one straight shot was Master of One by Jordan Rayner. And it's based on the principle of, I'm sure you know the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. And the idea or the principle behind the book is that you really have to focus on one thing with intensity. When you can focus on that one thing with intensity, that's when you reach the point of excellence. So he gives multiple examples of people who were trying to multitask. They were doing 3 or 4 things at the same time, and they only made 2 or 3 steps of progress. Whereas those who just really filtered, and it's like, this is where I'm going to master this. And it may not be you're going to master that one thing for the rest of your life, but for this particular season, I'm going to become excellent in this thing. And when you do, that then opens up other doors. And it's one of the things I talk about in my learning strategies with the students that I work with, that I think in 2021, the issue of multitasking is a significant one, where we feel that the best way to save time is to multitask. If I can read a book while I'm listening to an audio lecture, while I'm watching something on TV and keep an eye on the game, look, I'm doing 4 things at the same time. Excellent. But the research very clearly demonstrates that just you focusing on more than one thing actually breaks the concentration on the main thing you're trying to do. So it is better for you to have 1 hour focusing intensely on one thing than to be spending 3 or 4 hours trying to multitask and doing 3 or 4 things at the same time. So I think that book really spoke to me in that area. And I think that's something that I've really tried to do, particularly in regards to my business, is just to really be more focused and intentional about my day so that I can actually make quicker progress by just really being focused.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And I know that, we do this weekly broadcast for everyone in the audience to really learn a strategy or multiple strategies to benefit. But you just teaching and sharing about that focus, it definitely hit home for me, because there's many times that I have many things that are going on, but being focused and going deeper and being more productive is definitely key. So I appreciate you pouring into me as well as the audience this afternoon.
Sure.
So I want to ask you about a mentorship or coaching. One is, do you have a mentor or a coach? And also, what has been one thing you learned from your mentor or coach that has impacted your career?
This time last year, it was one of the things that I was really searching for. I've often been a mentor, but I often haven't had a consistent mentor in my own life. And it was one thing that I really prayed about, that I wanted to have better mentorship. And I've been blessed. I've been blessed in the last year, the last 18 months, I'd say. I've been able to connect with multiple mentors. So I have a few mentors in relation to my business. And I have a mentor in relation to my spiritual life, but also in terms of relationships and so on. And also with that related to education too. One of the things that I've learned this year in having a mentor is just about taking action. I think I can naturally be someone, and again, thinking about the fact that I'm a learning strategist, I tend to be very strategic in what I do, and I really value taking time to think about what I'm doing and really planning through my next steps. But I think what can often happen is that can lead to a certain level of inaction. You know, it's that paralysis by analysis kind of thing. And I think one of the things that having a mentor has really done is to really expose some of those blind spots, just to say, you know what, you really can grow just by trying something. Even if you don't hit the target in exactly the way that you want to, just the fact that you've tried something, it's a learning experience. And in a sense, that's shifted the learning idea for me. I've always thought about learning in terms of, you know, you have a curriculum, you have a method, you have step by step, there's a process, there's a procedure. Whereas what I'm learning is that sometimes some of the best learning is just by doing something. As long as you've taken the time to reflect on what you've done, to evaluate, to analyze, some of the best learning is just by taking action.
Yeah, very good. And I'm glad to hear that you have mentors in different areas of your life. And for the audience, the point is that some people just think that you just need to have one mentor, but it's even more powerful when you have mentors in different areas of your life to be able to help you move forward in those different areas. So thank you very much for sharing your experience and the importance of mentorship. So let's talk about the opportunities that you had in reference to becoming a department chairperson. And there's people that are in the audience that are moving from this role of, yes, I was a teacher within the department. Now I'm transitioning to be a department head and leading your peers. So just talk to me about any challenges you had about making that transition and a lesson learned that's going to help someone in the audience.
I think that in terms of a challenge, I think that because others are looking to you for guidance and for direction, you have to be a few steps ahead strategically. And remembering as well, teaching is a bit of an unusual profession in the sense that as a teacher who is also a department lead, you still have responsibility for your own classes. It's not that you just become a department head and you switch off. You still have responsibility. You still have to mark books. You still have to plan your curriculum. So the first thing is you need to make sure you're doing your job well. I think you mentioned earlier on about modeling. There's no point in me giving you instruction on your pedagogy and then I'm not doing the things myself. So the first thing is to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable to the standards that you're setting for others. But then I think it goes beyond just dealing with the curriculum. You've got to be thinking strategically. So the people who I'm leading, the people who are looking to me, what do they need? And how can I proactively put those things in place? One of the worst things you can be as a leader is just reactive. And particularly when you think about an education environment, things change so quickly. It could be the environment within the school. It could be policy that's coming from government. It could be what's going on in the community. Things can change literally overnight. And if we're continually in that reactive mode, that's where stress comes in. That's where feeling overwhelmed comes in. So I think one of the biggest things is just being able to support those you're leading with a proactive mindset. I think the other challenge that I would mention is I think sometimes we lose sight of this, and it's the fact that we are educators, but we're also people, meaning we're parents, we are spouses, we are sons, daughters, we're members of our community. Life happens. I know a lot of our students don't see it that way. They almost think of us just kind of just jumping out of the desk every morning, just we have no other existence outside of the classroom. But I think when you lead others, I think it's to be paying attention to what's going on within the curriculum, within the framework of the educational institution, but also paying interest in them as people. How are you doing? How was your weekend? And not just asking it as like an arbitrary question, but genuinely taking notes so you can follow up later on, but taking an interest in them as individuals. And I think some of the challenges that I've faced is, particularly when you have newer teachers coming in, the experience of burnout is real. Because when you're going into teach training college and you're preparing to become a teacher, you have a different kind of mindset, a different type of energy. And to sustain that when you come into a real job where there's real commitments and these real demands, it can be difficult. And I think there's that perfectionism thing that a lot of new teachers have. And I think it's really just being able to sit down with them and to talk about what are your goals and what are your expectations for the year ahead. But then you as a leader to also be able to speak into those expectations. So I know there were staff that I worked with that I had to help them reset their expectations in the sense that they were saying, I'm going to do this. And I was just like, okay, that's awesome. All I want you to do this year is to pace yourself and do the fundamentals really well. And then let's build. I don't want you to burn out by Christmas. I want you to sustain this until the summer. So I think it's really about just seeing people on a real level and being able to connect with them beyond just the curriculum basis.
Very good. Very good. There's two things that when you were sharing that answer that I want to go deeper and talk about. And one is around professional development. For someone that is seeking or is currently in a role as an academic coach or a learning strategist, what is one professional development experience that you would encourage and recommend for them to do?
It may sound strange. It shouldn't sound strange, but it often does. When we think about professional development, we think about what course can I do? What training can I get involved with? Who can I go and shadow? I would say my number one professional development strategy for someone who wants to go into the area of academic coaching, learning strategies, go and study. Take a class and go and study and really reflect on your learning. And I was thinking about this before. If I'm going to hire a fitness instructor, and it's the early part of the year, a lot of people have hired their personal trainers to get them into good shape. If you hired a fitness instructor that themselves was not going for runs and staying fit, for me, you'd lose a bit of credibility. I want to know that when I'm doing the 50th crunch and my stomach is burning, I want to know that you understand what I'm going through because you were doing that this morning. And I think sometimes what often happens as educators is that we take ourselves out of the learning process. And it was interesting when I did my master's degree 2 or 3 years ago. At that time, I was working in a university and I was speaking to students about citation and about time management and about how to use APA formatting in all of these different areas. And I was speaking about it from a very theoretical perspective. This is what you must do. But then when I got back into the classroom, now suddenly I'm seeing it from a different perspective in terms of how to manage everything. What is the best way to prepare for a quiz and a test? Because the methods that I was using was way back when I was doing my undergrad or when I was in high school. Those methods may not work now. So I think for us as educators to continue to develop ourselves, particularly when we're trying to teach students learning strategies, I think you have to really be, in a sense, taking your own medicine. And I think that allows us to then speak not just from a theoretical perspective, but from a practical perspective, taking into account the different demands that students in 2021 are facing.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. And another question that came out of your previous answer is about work-life balance. I want to say like work-life harmony. So you are a husband, a father, a student, you're running a business that we're going to talk about shortly. How do you create this harmony and this balance with everything that's going on?
I'd love to say always is harmony. I aim for that, but sometimes it can be a little bit disruptive at times. But I think really what it comes down to is is really being disciplined with the activities that you're doing, and really being clear about. And I think it goes back to, again, this idea of purpose. I'm a strong believer that your productivity has to be related to your sense of purpose, because there are so many things that are competing for our attention, that there are a lot of things that we get involved in that are really not necessary. One of the best books that I always refer to, I think it's just behind me actually, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in the book, Dr. Stephen Covey talks about the time management matrix, and the idea that all of our time can be divided into 4 main quadrants. So you have quadrant 1, which are the tasks which are seen as being important and urgent. Quadrant 2, the tasks which are seen as being important, but they're not urgent. Quadrant 3, these are the tasks which are seen as urgent, but they're not really important. And then quadrant 4, not urgent, not important. And when I often talk about this to the students or the clients that I work with, I ask them, where are you spending a lot of time? And a lot of them talk about quadrant 4, a lot of stuff that's not important and not urgent. Or they're spending a lot of time in quadrant 3, a lot of stuff that feels as though it's important, or it feels as though it's urgent, but it's not really that important. So a lot of our emails, a lot of our text messages, a lot of our social media pings and beeps and all that kind of stuff. But really where we should be spending most of our time should be in quadrant 2, where we're spending time on things that are important, but they're not urgent. So it's the idea of being proactive. The more time we spend being proactive, the less time we spend being reactive. That quadrant 1, where we're reactive, that is where you can classify that as emergencies, crises, and just stress. And unfortunately, as educators and as people in general, we often spend a lot of our time reacting to stuff. So I think for me, how I try to be more productive is to really prioritize what I'm spending my time on, but not just prioritize what I spend time on, but prioritizing when I spend my time on those things. So for example, I love to watch sports. I love to watch movies. I do that specifically in the evening. Why do I do it then? Because I know that in the evening time, my brain is not functioning as well as it does first thing in the morning. I'm just not as productive in the evenings. The morning, however, I already mentioned I'm a morning person. In the morning, I am super productive. I'm really focused. I can get a lot done. I can probably get more done in the first 4 hours of the day than I can in the next 10 hours that follow, just because of my level of focus. And that's why I'll often get up at 5:30 in the morning if I've got something that I really need to focus on. So for me, those early morning slots, I block those times out. I don't put any appointments in there. I don't put any grocery shopping or anything in there. Those are my golden hours. And because they're my golden hours, I put my most important tasks into those golden hours. When my brain starts to slip away and I can barely hold a conversation, that's time to watch football. That's time to watch basketball, because I need maybe 2 brain cells to do that. That's when I'll do my chores. I'll do a lot of the ironing, the household stuff. So it's not just about prioritizing, but it's also about having a clear idea of when during the day am I most productive? And then in those hours, what can I do to make sure that my most important things are dedicated in those times? Because you know what? If I only get those things done, I'm still winning. Whereas if I've got the groceries done and I've cleaned the closet for the 10th time this week and all these kind of things, but I haven't got my most important task done, that's where it gets frustrating. And that's when we get back to that quadrant 1 where we're reacting to stuff and we're in that crisis and we're feeling overwhelmed.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And one thing that you mentioned is about your most productive time period. And for me, it is the morning as well. And I used to think that there's some tasks, being a school administrator, that I do not like to do. Okay. And I would really try to think that, yes, I have the most energy in the morning. Let me do those tasks. And yes, sometimes those tasks can drain you. And what I think what really came through in terms of what you said, there's going to be some tasks that you have to do that you like to do, that energize you, and some tasks that you have to do that drains you. But it's what is important and the priority. That is the key thing. Okay. When you have that, identify your energy time. If it's in the morning, or some people operate better in the afternoon, some are in the evening, or whatever, do what is the priority.
Absolutely.
And that is a key thing that I had to learn the hard way. Okay, but that
Yeah.
goes back in terms of once you understand the priority, and that's when you're more productive. So that has definitely resonated with me when you were sharing.
Can I just add one more point to that?
Sure.
And I think it particularly focuses on a lot of leaders.
Mhm.
Um, I think Brian Tracy spoke about different aspects of how we can manage our day in terms of prioritization. And he said that, when you make a list of the things you've got to do in a particular day, you should be able to categorize them according to what are the things I need to do. So these are the things that if I don't do them, there's serious consequences. But then there are items on your list that you think you have to do that you could probably delay. One of the biggest weaknesses that I see in leaders, and it can often be the case, particularly in an education environment, is the third D, which is the lack of delegation, that we don't delegate enough. And sometimes it's a control thing. It's so important, I've got to make sure I do it. But then often some of the things that you're delegating don't really need you to do it. And this could be someone else in your team, someone else in your organization who could do the job just as good as you. Or maybe they can do it even better than you.
Mm.
And the thing about that is that if you've got somebody else who can do it better than you, that frees up your time to focus on the things that really need your fingerprints on them. But on top of that, as leaders, leadership isn't just about you telling people what to do, but it's giving people the space to grow. I guarantee that if there are leaders who are listening in today, I guarantee you there are people in your team, in your organization, who want to grow and they're looking for opportunities to grow, but they can't grow because you're holding on to everything. So delegation is one of the biggest things that I have learned. There's these things that I've done within my business that I probably could learn to do. But why am I going to take 6 hours to learn how to configure, my SEO optimization on my website when there's probably some kid in Nigeria somewhere who is looking for an opportunity and he could do it in 10 minutes and earn a bit of money on the side for that? So I think one thing I really want to emphasize in terms of our leadership and our time and our productivity is really get used to the idea of delegation. You are needed in specific areas where your influence is important, but you holding on to stuff, it makes you less productive and it also starves other people from the opportunity to grow and develop in their own leadership too.
Very good. Very good. So let's talk about your business, Achieve on Purpose. Just share with the audience your mission, your vision, and also how we can stay connected to the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. So Achieve on Purpose is a bit of a play on words. It has a bit of a dual meaning. So Achieve on Purpose means that one, you're focusing on your purpose and what am I called to do? What are my areas of influence? How can I excel in those areas of influence? And often when we find our sense of purpose, that's when we have maximum success. But Achieve on Purpose also speaks to the fact that the greatest successes in life are not accidental. They're intentional. There's a plan. There's a strategy behind it. So what my business really focuses on is really helping individuals to really target the areas where they want to become excellent and to have a strategy as to how to achieve that. And it kind of splits into two main areas. So one, looking at the academic excellence side. So looking at how can we help students to perform better in their education. So in terms of better note taking, better reading comprehension, better exam preparation, better study planning and time management. But equally, it can be to do with them thinking about their future and goal setting. If we can motivate our students by helping them to create a clear picture as to what they want to be and what they want to do, I truly believe that we'll see that their motivation levels will go up and they'll achieve more. But then the other side of it is that in all my years working with students, I found there were some core principles that really helped my students to perform well. And when I looked at it, those core principles apply to any of us. So the other area that I really focus on is the area of personal effectiveness. So that's beyond the educational realm, but it's looking at you as a father, as a husband, as an employee, as a business leader, as a community leader. How can we help you to get to the place that you need to get to according to the gifts and the skills you have? In other words, how can we help you to get out of your own way? So it could be, again, about, can we clarify what your vision is? How can we help you to develop a resilient mindset? How can we help you to become more productive so you get more done in a given time? How can we help you to set really clear, achievable goals? Rather than all the stuff that we've been doing for the last few weeks of our New Year's resolutions, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And then by February, it's all gone out the window. How can we help people really target it? And one of the groups I really love to speak to is the group you mentioned. It's those professionals who have multiple demands on them. As I said, they have multiple areas of their life, professionally and personally. And there's that continual frustration. How do I move myself forward? And what I do through coaching, one-on-one, through group coaching, through mastermind sessions, through trainings, through workshops, I really focus on a number of different areas to really help individuals achieve that. So in terms of the education piece, the area that I'm really trying to develop in the next couple of months, and hopefully we see more of that, will be really focusing on supporting not only the students in schools, but also leaders in schools. So again, doing training on areas like time management and resilience, communication. How can we foster a really healthy group atmosphere? We're looking at online learning. How can we help teachers to be able to cultivate a good group atmosphere where learning can still authentically take place? So in terms of connecting with me, the website, achieveonpurpose.com, you can see some information about what's there. So in terms of the programs and the different services I offer, if you go to achieveonpurpose.com/offers. Otherwise, I'm on Instagram and also on Facebook. But if there's any educators out there who just have heard some of the things that we've talked about and think, okay, maybe there could be a connection point, shoot me an email. So contact@achieveonpurpose.com. So contact@achieveonpurpose.com. Send me an email. Let's book a time to meet. And I'm happy to see if we can customize something, because I really want to make sure that whatever I deliver in terms of workshops, one-on-ones, masterclasses, I want to make sure that it's something that really fits the mandate that you have. I'm not into the cookie cutter thing. What works for a school in Canada is going to work for a school in England. Let's find out what your needs are. I can show you the things that I do, and we'll see where the fit may lie.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing the information around your vision and also your mission for Achieve on Purpose. So I want to, as we close out for this time together, this audience consists of students, teachers, aspiring teachers, aspiring school leaders, current school leaders, and superintendents, and not only just in our the United States, but Canada and other countries. But what is a piece of advice or something that you like to share with the audience that will be able to help them on this journey?
I think just to create space for yourself to get off the treadmill. I think that sometimes we're so busy that we don't even know what we're doing. We just know that we're moving. And because we're moving, we assume that we're actually heading in a particular direction. And more often than not, we're really not. So I think it's really about taking those spaces to sit down and to be strategic. Often we do it December 31st, January 1st, thinking about the year ahead. But I think really that should be a regular part of our week. I even encourage people to say, at the end of a week on a Sunday evening, sit down and think, okay, what are my broader goals and how have I achieved them in this past week? What are the things I need to do in the week ahead? And that's where, connecting with people like myself, connecting with people like yourself, who can help that conversation is really important. And I think as educators, it's also important to do that with your students. Sometimes we get so focused on the syllabus, on the curriculum, on the course outline, on the learning outcomes, that we just assume that we're going to put the kids into a machine and they're going to come out on the other end the way we want them to. But create pauses where you can sit and you can give them space to reflect. And even as leaders, as whether you're a principal, whether you're a department head, take the time to strategically think about what is it that we're trying to achieve here, and just give yourself the space to review and to reflect and to evaluate, and just to be really strategic about your action. Focus. And that's really the key to productivity. How do we focus?
Very good. Very good. Well, Kerrie Martin, I want to thank you for being on the show today, and thank you for modeling excellence for your school community. And for everyone watching, thank you for tuning in to the Principal's Office. Join us next week for another episode with an amazing educator that has done things significantly for themselves, for others, and with others. Have a great week and see you soon.